Hello everyone. This video is part of a series where our main goal is to learn the basic concepts of TypeScript. I'm using TypeScript in all the other series that I'm making available in my channel, so I thought that it would make sense that I make a brief series to discuss the main concepts so that you can better understand what I'm discussing in the other series. In the previous video, we set up the project for our TypeScript by example series, and we are using Create React App. So I discussed a couple of the limitations of Create React App and some restrictions in terms of configurations, but because our main purpose here is to learn TypeScript, then we don't need to worry that much about these restrictions. So we will mostly work in the client here. There will be no backend, no connection to a database nor anything. So we don't need to worry that much about the restrictions that a complex application would suffer from, right? So in this video, what I'm planning to do is to give you a brief overview of how React works, right? What are the basic components of our React application and how can we structure our code in a React way. So as you can see here, I have a function app, right? And this function contains a lot of HTML in it. And I would expect you to be a little bit familiar with HTML, so I'm not going to go into the details of how to structure with a div or a header, an image, paragraph, and a link. I would expect you to be familiar with it. But I'm not expecting you to be familiar with React, so I'll try to keep things as simple as possible in our series or in this series, right? For a more complex React application, this will happen in the social media application series, and I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. So as you can see, there are several components to this HTML, right? We have an image here, we have a paragraph, and we have a link. And the main idea behind React is to allow us to break down this HTML application or this HTML code into a series of individual and to a great extent independent components that we can then assemble together in our final application so that we display the application as we want to the user, right? So this is the first thing or the first concept that I want to mention. And the second concept is that React also focuses on reacting to changes in the data, right? So we always have data in our application. So for example, this learn React here, this is a text, right? And if we hard code this in HTML, well, we cannot really change this easily. Maybe we can with jQuery and so on and so on. But React is another way of allowing us to change this data or to change the data of our application and to react to the changes to the data. So let's see how this would work. Here, instead of hard coding my image component within my HTML, what I can do is I can extract this to a React component. Now, what is a React component? There are two ways of creating React components. The first one, and it's not the one that we will use here, are the class components. So if I were to define a class, my class component, which extends the class react.component, I can then render whatever HTML I want to by defining a render method. And within the render method, I can return, let's say I will return this image component, right? Sorry, it's not curly braces, should be parentheses here. So like this. And now I will start my application. Before I add my class component, I will just start this. So I want to show you that virtually nothing is going to change. Give it a couple of seconds. It's going to start the development server and it's going to refresh this page. Exactly. So as you can see, it's exactly the same as when we left the previous video. And now if I take my class component and I add here to my HTML, and now you may be wondering, what? I mean, what are you adding? It's not HTML. Yeah, I know, but we will come back to this in a bit. But as you will see, the whole component is still, or the whole application is still working correctly, right? If I refresh, I still see the same thing. And this is what React is based on. So it's based on the idea that we can define our own quote-unquote HTML components, and this is, to be more precise, this is called a JSX component, right? We can define these things and we can assemble them, we can build them, like we can use them as building blocks so that we can build our application in the end. So if I were to continue breaking this app function here down into its own components, we would extract the paragraph, we would extract the link, and we will do so. But first, I want to present the second way of defining components, right? So the first way was to use a class, and the second way is to use a function. So I'm going to use a function here, my function component, and I don't need to extend any class. I just need to return something that contains JSX in it, right? So if I were to even a string is considered to be JSX, right? So to be even more precise, I wouldn't return a JSX, I need to return a React element. And then an element can be a string, can be a number, can be null, can be JSX, can be HTML, anything that could be rendered on the screen, right? So here I will simply return my paragraph, right? So I will extract this paragraph here into my function component, and then I will put my function component where my paragraph was, and I'm going to save this. And as you can see, once the compiling is over, the application is still working as expected, right? So I can now extract my link, but first I want to migrate from class to function component. So why do I want to do so? It's because function components are much easier to understand and much easier to work with, and they are much lighter than class components. So class components are the way that we would use a React application in the past, but since I think a couple of years already, 2-3 years, React is really pushing the function components to be the new implementation pattern. So we will go with it because they have a series of benefits without any downside that wouldn't come either with or that would also be included in a class component. So here I'm going to refactor this to be a function, and I'm going to be a little bit more precise about the name. This is an image component, and this is again a function, right? So an arrow function that will simply return the image. And now I need to change this to image, and here I will say paragraph component, right? This is the paragraph component. Now I'm going to extract the link, and I'm going to say that this is the link component, and the link component is nothing more than a return statement that is going to contain my link, right? So that is my link component, and here I can just add this to my HTML, quote-unquote HTML, so my JSX component that is returned by my function app. And just for the sake of being consistent, let me change this to an arrow function as well. So as you can see, we can use both. We can use either a normal function or an arrow function. Both of them work just fine. Give it a couple of seconds, everything is compiled and everything is still working as we want it to work. So what is going to happen now? Before we go a little bit more into the discussion of how we pass information around in a React application, I could also extract my header, right? So let's make this even a little bit more, a little bit cleaner by saying header component, and it's going to be again an arrow function that is going to return this whole component, right? and then I can just pass my header component to my app component. And you may be wondering, okay, what is this app component doing? Well, give me just a few seconds and I will explain to you. So everything is working as expected. Let's understand what this app component is doing. So if I come to my index.tsx file, as you can see, I'm importing this app component from my file ./app, and then I am rendering this in some document or some node, some DOM node, right? So if I come into the public directory and I open the index.html file and I scroll down a little bit, you see that I have an empty div with an ID of root, right? So what the index.tsx file is doing is saying, okay, find this div with an ID of root and render the app component within this div. So this app component, which is my application, is being rendered in the DOM, and that's why everything is working as expected, right? So if I were to write another component and say, okay, render that component in the DOM, then this would work as well. So what I want to discuss now with you is how do we pass data to a component, right? So we already saw that we can define our own JSX components, and we can write as whatever HTML, as long as it's valid, whatever HTML we want within this JSX function components. But how do we tell a certain component that data, or how do we inform, how do we communicate data to a component, right? If we look at an HTML tag, a normal HTML tag, for example, the A tag or the image tag, we are already passing some information, right? So we are passing the source of an image, we are passing some class name, we are passing some alt text. For a link, we are passing class name, the href attribute, and the target, for example. And it's nothing different with React components. So with React components, I can simply come here to my custom defined JSX tag, and I can pass some information around. So let's say that in my link, okay, let's go to the link component maybe, and then we can try to change the text within our link. Right, so let's say that instead of hard coding Learn React, I want to pass a link text to my component, and this link text is going to be my Learn React. Right, now you see that I have an error here, and this is TypeScript complaining, so I'm going to do some little magic, and we will discuss this in the previous videos, but it's just necessary for the error to disappear. Right, so here you see that I added an argument, I added a parameter to my function, and this parameter is basically an object, it's not basically, it is an object that contains all our attributes that we are passing to our JSX elements as a key. So each attribute is a key, and then the value of that attribute is then the value of the key in our props dictionary. So if I were to console this props dictionary, you will see that it's going to show the object link text, right? So give it a couple of seconds, it will compile. And then if I come here, as you can see, it already printed out link text, Learn React. So now if I were to substitute Learn React with props.linkText, this will still work as expected, right? So here I print it out again. If I want to add more information, let's say a link color, right? For example, we'll say red. Let's see what this is going to tell us. Yeah, link color is red. So the object is populated, right? Even though I'm not using here in my component, maybe I could even try to pass a style to this component, and in React we define style a little bit different, so I think that color is the property we are looking for. That would be props.linkColor, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, so now we have red as being our color, right? So as you can see, we can change the information that we are passing to the component, or we can tell the component some information by defining it in our JSX element, right? So if I were to change the learn React to learn TypeScript, then this is going to display as learn TypeScript. Okay, so I think we have discussed the two main aspects of React, that we can decompose our application into components and that we can pass information to our components, right? So this information here is hard-coded, but what if I were to change this, right? What if I were to, instead of hard-coding the information in my properties, or in exactly, I think that I will start saying props from now on. So whatever attributes that I add to a JSX component, this is by convention called the props of the component, right? So what if instead of using a hard-coded text, I were to use something like this? So we will probably discuss the hooks or React hooks. If you're interested in it and you never came across this, it's very easy to understand. So what I will do is something like this, and I will explain it to you in a bit what I'm typing. So within function components, React gives us a couple of utilities that we can use if we want to have some more complex behavior. And the use state is what we call a hook, right? A React hook. Maybe we get to discuss React hooks in this series, but if not in this series, for sure in the social media app series. So I will add a link to the social media or to the social media app series so that you can have if you want to, a much more in-depth discussion of React. But what this use state is doing, it's basically giving us two pieces of information. Not two pieces of information, but one piece of information that is the value of this state of my component and a way of changing this state of my component, right? So if I were to change, if for example at some point I want to change the value of link text, I can simply call this function set link text with my new value, let's say learn React, and then this will update the link text, right? So the value of this link text. So now if I were to pass here to link text not a hard-coded string, but that variable that is being returned by this use state, and let's say that here I'm going to say a set timeout of 2 seconds, right? So let's change this after 2 seconds. And after 2 seconds, I want to call this set link text function, right? So it's interesting if we go for something like this, let's say some text, and then within the function here, so that would be, let's say, some text. And within the function here, I were to say some text is equal to another text. This is not going to work, right? So then if I pass this some text here as the value for link text, this is not going to work, right? So if I will demonstrate that to you or show you, so I'm setting the timeout of 2 seconds. Let me come back to my screen here, and as you can see, we started with some text, right? So I refresh it, some text, and after 2 seconds it's going to still be some text, and after 10 seconds it's still some text. So as you can see, the value is really not changing, right? The component's not reacting, and that's because we are hard coding it as a variable. If we want the component to be able to react to changes in the value of a certain piece of state, it's recommendable that we use this use state hook. That's exactly the purpose of this use state, right? So now I'm back to passing link text. I will save this component and I will come back to my browser, and we will see that after 2 seconds, this learn TypeScript is going to change to learn React. Right? Give it a couple of seconds. Oh, there you go. It's changed, right? So if I were to refresh this, then as you can see, learn TypeScript changes to learn React after 2 seconds. That's very nice, right? Because then I can also define, let's say, the color not link text, but link color. And I can say set link color, and I will start with the color red. But then after 2 seconds, I want to change this set link color to blue, right? And then instead of hard coding red, I can simply pass link color, my variable here that is returned from by my use state function. And as you can see, after 2 seconds, this is going to change. So let me refresh. And after 2 seconds, whoa, that's very hard to read, but as you can see, it fulfills the purpose of changing the component and updating it according to the new value that is being passed down as a prop. Right, so this is, I think, the core of React, that is to react to changes in the information that is being passed to the component. Okay, so this concludes this very brief introduction. Of course, there is way more to React and a lot of things that you can discover by yourself. In the next videos, we will also maybe discuss a few additional concepts as we start working with TypeScript. But I think that these two main pieces of information, that we can split our application and that we can pass information to our different pieces of the application, these are the two things that you need to know before we move forward in this series. Okay, so with this we reach the end of the video. And of course, if you want to get notifications, if you want to be informed about new videos every time I upload them, so I upload videos every day, 2 videos per day, I try to. But if you want to get the notifications and follow up on other things, other playlists that are being published, then make sure to subscribe, right? And you'll get a brief notification every time there is a new video available. So thank you very much for your time, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.